So next on the programme this morning, a damning report says surgical services at 4 Sussex hospitals must improve at an urgent pace. The Care Quality Commission ranked Brighton's Royal Sussex, St Richard's in Chichester, Worthing Hospital and the Princess Royal in Haywards Heath as all requires improvement after unannounced inspections last year. It comes amid an ongoing police investigation into more than 40 unnecessary deaths in neurosurgery and general surgery at the Royal Sussex. Our health correspondent Mark Norman has been looking into the report. Talk us through the main headlines of this, Mark, for us.
Well, sure, Daniel. I think one of the things that's going to get lost is the fact that inspectors were keen to point out some of the exceptional caring staff that they found in those 4 hospitals. But it gets lost in the headlines. As you said, Worthing and St Richard's, both rated outstanding in 2019, now downgraded to requires improvement. Bear in mind, they took over the Royal Sussex County Hospital in 2021 in a merger. But the report talks about problems with leadership teams not being visible, a disconnect between the staff and the leadership, and some of that impacting on patient care, and lots of problems with culture, in particular at the Royal Sussex around bullying, staff morale low, staff not being listened to. We spoke to Neil Cox. He's the Care Quality Commission's Deputy Director, and he summarised for us their main findings at Brighton's Royal Sussex.
At the Royal Sussex, we looked at surgery and medical care, which included older people's care. Overall rating for surgery has improved from inadequate to requires improvement, but the medical care rating has dropped from good to requires improvement. There weren't always enough staff to care for people in respect of surgery. Medicines management was an issue.
As you say, Mark, the CQC talk about the need to make urgent improvements around leadership and culture at a much more urgent pace. What specifically are they getting at with that?
So I think what they're getting at, Danny, is there's a recognition by them, the Care Quality Commission. I think there is also a recognition by the leadership at the Trust, so both together, that they recognise the changes that need to happen, but they're not happening quick enough on the ground. And they're basically telling the leadership, get off your butt, get down there and make it happen on the ground floor. Now, George Findlay, the Chief Executive, who I know you're going to be talking to in a minute, he was instrumental at Worthing and St Richard's. He was one of the very senior members of staff who took that trust, as it was then, Western Sussex as it was, to outstanding. So he knows what it takes. And I think they're saying to him and his executive leadership team, you need to sort this out and do it quickly. The Care Quality Commission's Deputy Director, Neil Cox, who we heard from a moment ago, he talked to us the wide scale of problems are in both St Richard's and Worthing Hospital.
The concerns we had at those 2 services were the hospitals not always having enough staff to care for people and keep them safe, medicines management, and didn't always have access to service when people needed it and had to wait too long for treatment, and there were often repeated cancellations.
And Mark, they also say if another inspection reveals these improvements are not sustained and embedded, they'll use their enforcement powers. What are those?
Yeah, so ultimately, I mean, they can start to impose conditions on the trust, things like having to do Care Quality Commission reports weekly. If things got really bad, they could suspend a registration. We're a long way away from that, I think. But I think NHS England, the Department of Health and the Care Quality Commission will all be on the backs of the executive team trying to make sure that they turn this around. It's an extremely big trust. It's clearly struggled since the merger. But ultimately, they have to do this and they have to do it quickly in order to improve patient care.
Our health correspondent Mark Norman there, thank you. Listening to that, Dr George Findlay, the CEO of University Hospitals Sussex NHS Foundation Trust, who run those hospitals. Dr Findlay, good morning.
Good morning, Danny.
And again, like Mark said, let's recognise the exceptional care that was highlighted in this report, people day to day looking after patients.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, staff are providing amazing care, working incredibly hard. But it's been difficult. There's no doubt it's been very difficult for the past few years across the NHS and both locally. And what is important is what we're doing about that. This inspection took place in June of last year. Before that and since that, we've been very focused on making improvements for things that really matter to our patients and things that matter to our staff.
And why do you think the culture at the hospitals has got as bad as this for this report to highlight it?
So I just acknowledge how difficult it's been for staff over a number of years. It feels incredibly challenging in health just now, and we've got to understand that, work with staff, to help things get better. There are a number of issues in some of our sites that have been present for a very long time, and we are making improvements, but it takes time. And culture, unfortunately, doesn't change quickly. But what can change quickly is behaviours. and our interventions as leaders and all staff, and that's where we're working closely with our colleagues.
So do you have enough management to ensure that you get really sort of dig down, find out what is going on? Because you're running 4 good-sized hospitals in Sussex there, and you up from the 2 that you had before in the trust. Is that part of the issue, that some of these things can go on unnoticed?
So I recognise the challenge that you've laid out for me. However, I believe that we have an operating model across the trust that does give really good local leadership, and the reports highlight that as well. You know, really good local leadership, and that's what matters to people. So in each of our hospitals, we have senior leaders, we have divisional leaders, and the executive team obviously supplement that. I think it's also important to point out that since 2017, both the former Western Sussex and Brighton and Sussex University Hospital were run by a single executive team. So that's a model that's been in place for a number of years now. However, the merger was transacted in 2021 to bring it into a single organisation.
And just finally, George, on that sort of top line about surgical services needing to improve at an urgent pace. Now, that suggests that there's a risk for patients in that if there's disruption and people at loggerheads in surgical services. What's going on there?
So again, acknowledge the challenges that we have in surgery services. In fact, we have a challenge across the hospital in many hospitals where patients are simply waiting far too long for the treatment they need. That's our top worry and my colleagues' top worry. So in surgery, particularly in the county site, we've been dealing with that through a very focused executive-led project. It's helpful that the CQC recognise improvements have been made in surgery services on the county site, but there's very much more to do. So we're investing in additional doctors. We're opening a new acute assessment unit to manage more emergency patients. And we're seeking to provide more theatre capacity for surgery patients to have their elective surgery more reliably delivered to them.
So what's your message or reassurance to people who might be going into hospital themselves or have a relative heading in sometime soon?
So I recognise that, you know, when ratings change, that can cause some anxiety. However, I will come back to the fact that the inspectors found great care in our hospitals, real compassion, and staff dedicated to giving patients what they need. As I said, the challenges are often patients wait too long for our treatment. I think you need to look behind the headlines here as well. Clearly, everybody's drawn to the one-word ratings. However, in the detail of the report, you will find many examples of good care and really good things that are happening. Lots of issues that we need to deal with, but we know what those issues are. We have improvement plans to deal with those issues, and I believe we are making a difference.
Many thanks for joining us. Have a good day. Dr. George Findlay there, the CEO of University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust.